So, thank you for that introduction, John. Always happy to help the museum. As without the museum, I'm sure I would have gotten involved in cars. I don't know if it would have been at the scale that it is. So the museum really kind of jump started me. So, yeah, there I am, 22 years ago with one of my first projects. From a young age, I've always been fascinated by anything mechanical, and especially anything old and mechanical. My dad worked at a construction company and would bring me to work with him, and I was just fascinated by the equipment, and I'd always want to be in the shop and seeing what the mechanics were doing, and that's kind of where it took off. So there's me again at the truck show, just out on the pad out back. Um, and so I loved history, loved anything that moves, that really kind of culminated in antique vehicles, because I just loved to see how things worked and started taking them apart to figure that out. And it would take me quite a while to figure out how to put them back together, but one thing at a time. So my great grandfather had purchased a 53 Willys Jeep brand new, and that was the buggy around the property for decades. And by the time I was growing up, it was rotting into the ground. But that was kind of trial by fire. I started taking that apart, figuring out how stuff worked. It still hasn't been put back together. Um, I've been a little busy since then. But again, it was just learning how to hold a tool, how to turn a wrench. And so I had all this mechanical passion, and I was taking apart all my mom's push mowers and RC cars, and I wasn't into sports. I didn't really fit into a lot of these standard hobbies for a kid my age. And but whenever I was brought to the transportation museum, my parents would have to fight to get me out of here. I loved coming here. And so they had the great idea of, why don't we get him volunteering over there? And the first summer I was here 5 or 6 days a week volunteering. I mean, even on days that weren't volunteer days, dad would just drop me off on his way to work, and started doing everything, just what do you give a 10-year-old to do at a place like this? I was polishing brass and sweeping the floors and kind of picking up whatever knowledge and advice and information I could. So this is a short little, just a less than a couple minutes, but a video that the Transportation Museum put together about 5 years ago.
I'm Philip Reinhardt. I'm from Tenants Harbor, Maine. Just graduated from McPherson College with a degree in antique automotive restoration. Owl's Head ignited a spark that set me on a trajectory towards antique cars. Every Tuesday and Thursday, there was a large group of core volunteers, and it was just cool, to run mechanical questions by them or just sit back and listen. And
that can underneath.
it got me really into that pre-World War I brass era automobile and technology, which is what made me stand out amongst other applicants at McPherson, because they're like, whoa, like you've worked on an '07 Cadillac, you're into pre-World War I stuff, you've driven them, you've turned wrenches. Because usually when kids come to McPherson, they're into tuner cars, muscle cars, and then I came already there, knowing the nomenclature and kind of the way that you treat a car that's 110 years old. That's as it was rescued from the barn.
Yeah.
Philip had acquired a Model T Ford from an uncle when he was maybe 15, 16. It was in deplorable shape. So knowing Philip here at the museum, and me being the ground vehicle conservator and loving Model Ts, I started teaching him Model T stuff, and within a year, Philip was able to drive that car around. Philip got to learn the ins and outs of the antique car world. He wanted to further his education in automotive restoration, and that's the path he's on.
The museum has taught me not only practical mechanical skills, but also life lessons, social skills, and I think put me on the path that I'm on today.
So yeah, that sums it up really well. But one of the biggest parts of those early years volunteering here at the museum were the older volunteers that were here. There was a stellar group of older volunteers, some World War II, some Korea, Vietnam veterans that really took me under their wing and had a lot more patience with me than I deserved. And like I say, they taught me a lot of mechanical stuff and tricks of the trade. But the biggest thing they taught me, was how to listen and how to take a joke. And they're really good. There aren't many of them left now, sadly, but really great group of guys. And I would never have met any of them if I hadn't volunteered here. And so you heard Warren mention the Model T that I was given when I was about 15, 14 years old. And there's a photo of that car in 1954. It was owned by what he called himself my woodpile uncle, Robert Scoglin, the humble farmer. Some of you might have heard of him, the main comic personality. And he was a big Model T guy. And he drove this car in 1950 to 1954 when he was in high school. So that's him leaning against the radiator with his buddy. And he parked it after high school and it sat in the same chicken coop until I pulled it out. And there's me with him around 2013, I have to say. And yeah, as Warren said aptly in the video, the car was in deplorable shape, home to many vermin. And we definitely had our work cut out for us for sure. And so the engine in that T was so uh, mummified and corroded with rodent feces and urine, and it was just there's no saving it on my budget. Warren had a salvageable engine in his stash of parts, and Warren gave me that engine to put in my car. So that's me and Warren's shop. We're honing the cylinders. We did a kind of a backyard rebuild on it to get it going. And so well, could be for better or worse, documented a lot of my mechanical escapades at that age on YouTube. And so here's me and the volunteer crew at the museum firing up that engine that Warren and I did a backyard rebuild on for the first time. There's at this point in time, you'll see there's Peter Curtis there. He was the ground vehicle conservator prior to Warren. Bob Kinghorn, I believe you're in the background of this video. um, and so yeah, this was kind of a seminal moment for me. And that's in the chicken coop at my mom's house. And so I would never gotten to this point, if it weren't for the volunteers taking time out of their own day to come down to my house and help me fire up an engine. To say I was lucky is a big understatement. Oh. So yeah, there's that. You get the point. And so yeah, we put that engine in the T, and I drove that all over the place. I drive that to high school, and there's me with Robert Scoglin, the humble farmer, driving him to his 60th or 65th high school reunion, and he promptly, showed the surviving members of his class his high school car that was back on the road. And so I volunteered, steady here up through high school, the events, the Thursday night shop night, and just slowly kind of building more skills, a little more confidence. Graduated from polishing brass to actually doing mechanical projects and helping out. And I'd never really considered uh, college. I didn't see myself fitting in at college. I was working, on boats, and I figured I would work on boats and use that money to play with cars on the side. And then I found out while just browsing the internet about this program out in the middle of Kansas called McPherson College. And they have the only 4 year accredited bachelor's degree in antique automotive restoration in the country. And it was just, it clicked instantly. I'm like, that's exactly what I want to do. I didn't I didn't want to go to college just to say I went to college for something that I wasn't passionate about. And so my junior year of high school, my dad and I flew out there and visited, and it was, kind of I'd never been to Kansas before. So there was a little bit of a culture shock landing in Wichita, and we're driving north from Wichita to McPherson, and there's just nothing as far as the eye can see except for cows and oil derricks. Um, and you're kind of thinking, what did we get ourselves into? But then we got to McPherson, which is a town about the size of Rockland, and got to the college, and we were blown away. The professors, the facility, the community there, it's all world class. And I was accepted and didn't apply to any other colleges, and enrolled there and started in 2015. So that's me in the college's Model T build team, where we would assemble a Model T, and typically our record was about 5 minutes and 27 seconds. We could put one together from parts. So there's a lot that made McPherson world class. Of course, number one is the classes in the education itself. It's a 4 year bachelor's degree. So not only am I taking automotive classes, but I have to take the general education courses as well. So it was very well rounded. You aren't just taking car classes all day, but when you are in the car classes, they're an amazing facility with instructors who have been in the profession for decades. They make it fun, they make it engaging. They really encourage the students to take ownership of these projects, and some of the students actually are working on projects they own in class, as long as they can make it relevant and apply what they're supposed to be learning. So there I am pouring babbited bearings in my own Model T engine in my advanced engines class. Um, the next greatest thing was just the community of it. You become friends with your professors because they're as crazy about cars as you are, and you're surrounded by other kids that are as passionate about this as you are, which, a lot of kids these days, I feel, growing up, if they have an interest in cars, are kind of used to being the odd one out. There isn't massive car cultures as part of that demographic, really. And so then to go from maybe having a handful of friends that are into cars at most, and then being surrounded by 150 of them, was awesome. And then in addition to the hands-on classes, you're taking classes to understand the why and the how of the car. Why did they design it this way? What technologies were they limited by? What are the social factors? You're learning the history of the design. And so you're really getting a well-rounded education to kind of prepare you to enter this field where research and respect for the source material is as important as the hands-on skills itself. And so, yeah, there's the main drivetrain and chassis lab at McPherson. And so the caption kind of says it all. It was, if my classroom didn't look like that, it'd kind of be hard to wake up in the morning and get motivated to go to class. And then after class, all of us auto students, we rented garage spaces at this storage complex across the street. And so this is what I was doing after class. And so we were working on our personal projects across the street till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. You'd go over there and there'd be people tinkering and listening to old music and talking cars. It was like, car guy mecca. That's Kurt Goodwin, my engines professor, an absolute hoot. Um, so there we are. I'd never seen anyone that happy to drill crankshaft counterweights on a Packard, but that's the kind of enthusiasm that it was just contagious. How could you not be excited with a professor like that? Um, the next Best thing about it was the experiences and the networking through the college. Because of their reputation, it opens many doors to their students, and they would there's many opportunities to go to car shows, go to rallies, go to private collections that the public can't see. And so there I am driving, which I believe is a 1911 Packard that belongs to Nikolai Bulgari collection in Allentown, Pennsylvania. There's quite an extracurricular experience there. And so, and these internships that you would get to go on would, kind of prepare you to get out in the job field. And you would network and meet, people at the top of the game in their field and make connections that you know, that are still active today. It's people that I still call on for help and advice. They're people that I met through these experiences. And so there's one of my internships at a high-end, foreign car restoration shop. So working on Ferrari V12s, Mercedes 300 SL Gull Wings, and a great team of guys that again had a lot more patience with me than I deserved. And the experiences. My spring break of my junior year, I went to Florida, but I went to Florida to see private car collections with the school on a sponsored trip. So that's at the Revs Institute in front of Ferrari there that won Le Mans. And then, go to events again through the school, Telluride, Cars in Color, and see private collections, that no one can just walk into. And so this is stuff that was kind of out of my wildest dreams as a car kid. And so there's us in the sheds, late at night working on a Trans Am. We have parking lot car shows. Um, it's when you're there, you can't help but think, is there any other place like this out there? And it's very hard to think that there is. And met a great group of friends, and they're all out there, doing what I'm doing. You know, whether it's got their own business or working for a top of the line shop. Nearly all the people in this photograph are, some of the top in their game out there restoring antique cars. So when people say that young kids don't like cars, McPherson is really proof that that's not completely true, because there is a whole, a class being turned out every year that's getting ready to go into this field. During summers, I would still come back and volunteer at the museum, and I was, like I say, just kind of getting a better hold of my skills and taking on more responsibility. Graduated in 2019, and I accepted a job with a shop I'd interned at a few times down in Massachusetts. So I got to work, and got to work on some of the most desirable, finest sports cars out there. There's Ferrari 275 short wheelbase, and working on a four cam Ferrari 275 GTB4, stuff I never thought that I would be able to touch, let alone breathe on. Um, and again, it's kind of McPherson that opened these doors. However, it wasn't long for an opportunity presented itself. If anything, I wish I'd stayed a little longer down there in Massachusetts, because I was learning so much, world class skills. But an opportunity came when a building came up for sale in my hometown of Tenants Harbor, just down the road. And I'd been driving by that building since I was a kid, and nothing was happening with it. And so we've been pestering the owner, hey, if you ever want to sell that, let me know, let me know. And sure enough, he called, said, yeah, I think I'm ready to sell that. And I was working in Massachusetts and kind of had that going for me, but I didn't want to miss out on this opportunity. So begged, borrowed, stealed, bought the place, quit my job and moved home, and worked on boats and worked at a buddy's shop and saved up some money till I could afford to open my own business. And so March 15th, 2020, I opened Mechanical Arts. And I was just in a 50 by 60 building, no heat, no insulation, no running water, but and just myself and a toolbox. And I had 3 jobs lined up when I opened. I had a 65 El Camino that had been sitting for about 20 years. I needed to get back on the road. 68 VW bus and 54 MGTF. And since then, I have not run out of work. We've stayed pretty busy since. So in 2021, we did our first little renovation and added insulation and heat and water, kind of the critical things needed for human life. And I added an apartment upstairs so I could move out of the camper I had parked next to the shop. And not long after that, in 2022, I hired my first employee. In 2025, we added the addition off to the right there, which is about 80 feet deep. And so we added 2 more lifts and a lot more equipment. And now we have a team of 5. And we can't keep up with the demand because there's just such a need for people who know how to work on antique cars. I've been lucky enough that I've been able to hire and continuously employ friends of mine from college, um, and well as some local people who are just very talented. And so there's inside our newest expansion. You can kind of see we work on a wide variety of cars. There's 28 Packard Speedster. We're prepping for the Great Race in the center, and a Morris Minor on the lift. 36 Ford ambulance in the background on the lift. Examples of some of our work. That's a before and after of a 31 Model A Deluxe Roadster we completely restored, nut and bolt, show quality restoration. And, early Fords is kind of, I'm the one that uh, undertakes those at the shop. Each one of us kind of has our area of you know, our specialty. And so growing up working on Model Ts and As, I'm the one that gets to handle a lot of that stuff. There's a 61 MGA that came to us in pieces before and after. That we did a full restoration on. That was about a 2-year project. But now for the main event, which I know some people have come here specifically to hear about, which is the 1962 Jaguar XKE off to our right here, which is a very special car, not only to me, but to a few other people as well. So during my time at McPherson, I was introduced to Tom Cotter, who some of you may have heard of. He's a well-known automotive journalist, wrote for Road and Track, and currently he has a very popular YouTube series called The Barn Find Hunter, where he travels the country profiling, or highlighting undiscovered cars. And so, excuse me for a second. So I connected with him because McPherson College has what they call a national advisory board for the automotive restoration program. So they have about 7 to 8 people on this advisory board who are all prominent members of the automotive restoration industry, who kind of help guide the curriculum and the future of the auto program. And Tom Cotter's one of them. And every year at the car show, they have roundtables where the students get to sit down and talk to these titans of industry in the automotive field. And you get time to talk with each and every one of them. So very unique experience. And I got talking with Tom. Turns out he summers in Maine. And so we kind of connected over that. And he would visit me in the summers and visit me in my shop once I got that set up. And he started talking to me about this wild Jaguar in a barn up in Hancock with a small block Chevy and big tires and flared fenders and side pipes that had quite a history. And that immediately caught my interest. And it wasn't long after that where Tom introduced me to the owners. Now, a little background on the XKE for those not familiar. Just like the XK120 a decade before it, which kind of shocked the automotive world, the XKE was a very successful, very advanced car for its day. Had independent suspension all the way around, disc brakes, inboard on the rear. Um, high performance machine for the time, and still respectable by today's standards. Top speed of 150 miles an hour. And of course, the biggest selling point of this car, or at least to me, is just the beauty of it. It's a beautiful design. And so Ferrari himself, a very proud man, quoted as saying, one of the most beautiful, the most beautiful car ever made. So that shows you just how much respect he had for the design. And so, but all that wasn't enough for Mr. Rod Franzius. He thought he could improve upon that. And so he's the owner of this car since 1964, is sitting in the front row here today. Rod purchased this car in 1964 when it was only 2 years old, and drove it in stock trim for about 6 months before hiring a man named Al Gars, who ran a shop called Speedway Motors in Brooklyn, New York. And Al was ran a sports car, and specifically Jaguar specialty shop, but he had a little niche market in V8 swapping Jaguar XKEs, even that early on. And this was supposedly the third one that he did. And so it's not a small job to make this, to swap in a Corvette drivetrain into an XKE. It required modifications to the front subframes, modifications to the transmission tunnel and the firewall, suspension modification, steering modification, electrical. There are many hacked up E-types out there with V8 stuffed into them, but this isn't one of them. Al did a professional job, and especially once we got to dismantle this car, we could really gain a bigger respect for the work he did and how much thought he put into it. Um, in these photos, you can see that the front structure of this car is all made out of square tubing. And it's very light, it's very strong. It's a material, a British specification called Reynolds 531. And some of those tubes only have a 40, 50 thousandths of an inch wall thickness. But when you weld those all together in that triangulated structure, it's very strong and very light. And the Brits engineered it very well. However, it's too narrow to fit a V8 down in between those rails. And so Al re-engineered it all and widened it, still using the correct material and everything. Widened it, rerouted the steering, moved the torsion bars for the suspension, and so that V8 sits in there down low, far back, so all the weight is centered and down low, and it's actually about 70 pounds lighter with the aluminum transmission behind it than the original Jaguar drivetrain. So it's more powerful, and lighter as well, and just because of how thorough he was and thoughtful with his modifications, it made it into quite a serious competitor. And so Rod, when it was all said and done, competed with it at autocrosses, race weekends, Jaguar Club North America events, never being bested by another Jaguar, because he had over 100 horsepower over the stock Jaguars and a little bit less weight with a little better weight distribution. And so it was a real serious contender. And so, here it is at Lime Rock, passing another Jaguar, a coupe. And with all that power, it certainly wasn't hard to break the rear tires loose. And so after a couple years, the Jaguar was in need of a refresh. It had some, minor bumps and bruises over the years, and they figured it was time to step it up another notch. So they performed a few more modifications, which is kind of how you see the car in its present state. They removed the heater ducts, which frame that front grill inlet. So now all the air is going right at the radiator for cooling. They added two holes to either side of it, which you can kind of see in this photo, to help the front brakes cool. They updated it to Series 2 Jaguar XKE brakes on all four corners, converted it to 5-lug hubs so they could run the Corvette Rally wheels, and flared the fenders so they could run some bigger tires to help put all that power to the ground. And just for a little added flair, added some side pipes to it. in typical late 60s fashion. And so in this configuration, uh, Rod drove and daily drove this Jaguar, and also, competed with it every now and then up until 1985. So you can see in that photo, it's got a little ding there on the fender. So he really wasn't afraid to, drive it hard. He got his money's worth out of this car for sure. And so this has got to be one of my favorite photos of the car. In addition to racing the Jaguar, he also raced his Vincent, his motorcycle, and because he said he could race the Vincent for a weekend on what it cost to put tires on the Jaguar. So it was a little more economical to race motorcycles. So he towed his Vincent all the way to Florida for Battle of the Twins at Daytona. And so this is not a sight you would probably see very often back then, but certainly not today. It's the trailer hitch is still on the Jaguar if you look. And so an unfortunate accident in '85 prompted the Jaguar to be parked for the next 38 years. And so Tom Cotter, who I was speaking about earlier, had been talking with Rod. They were connected because Tom is a big Cunningham sports car enthusiast and owns one, and Rod at one point owned a Cunningham, and that's kind of how they got connected. And they got talking, and Rod told him about this Jaguar he still had in the barn, which he kept because out of all the cars, Cunningham's, Austin Martin's, this Jaguar was his favorite one. And so this car being in Hancock and me being just a couple hours down the coast, Tom suggested to Rod that the team at Mechanical Arts undertake the project. And the years had not been kind to the red shoe, as they fondly call it. There's extensive rust on the subframes, the floors, the rocker panels, the engine block and the transmission case are both cracked. Um, Rodent damage throughout it, and of course the damage from the collision. And so, this car had been driven as a car. They drove it in the winter year round, and so that definitely had an effect on the body. Now, this car, because despite all that, the car was still pretty sound. And so, and with the history and the provenance of it, we really wanted to preserve rather than restore this car. So it is not, nut and bolt show quality restoration. We have done everything we can to preserve as much of the car's original character as possible because we believe that just helps tell this car's, incredible story. And so we went through it mechanically top to bottom. I could hop in that car and drive it wherever I wanted. Probably not this time of year, but I could hop in this car and I wouldn't hesitate to drive it anywhere just because of how sound it is. We only performed the cosmetic repairs as necessary and as sympathetically as we could. Again, trying to preserve as much of the original character and just the patina of the car. So we got to work, and we weren't aware of as much of the rust until we really dove into it. But once we dove into it, we figured that there's a little bit more work than we anticipated. But that's the case when anyone's restoring anything. And so the biggest challenge, of course, was the rush work and specifically those front subframes that I kind of explained earlier, where Jaguar used these steel tubes frames to provide the whole structure for the front of the car, the hood, the engine, the suspension, everything's hung off these steel tube subframes. And they're all brazed together. That material, Reynolds 531, which I talked about earlier, is very strong, very light, but it does not like to be welded. It becomes very brittle and it can crack. So it all has to be brazed. And so you can see that, that gold substance, that's the braze holding this all together. And you can buy brand new subframes for Jaguar XKEs because they're such a thin material, they do rust out. But you can't buy them for a 1962 XKE that was V8 swapped in 1964 at a shop in New York that doesn't exist anymore. And so we had to, you can see once we had these, oh, I gotta go back. Once we had them sandblasted, you can see all these pinholes in the tubing. And you could say, oh, well, you could patch those. And yeah, but it wouldn't be right because if there's pinholes there, that means the metal, even further up, even if it's not holed, it's still thin. And so we had no confidence in these subframes being able to support the front of the car anymore, especially with spirited driving. So we were kind of left with the question of what to do about this because we have a set of completely custom subframes and we need to repair them. And so we figured we'd do exactly what Al did. So we bought a set of brand new subframes and using these, originals that Al had modified as a template, we step by step performed the same modifications that he did. And we did it all the right way with brazing. We called up the only outfit we could find in England, which could provide us with that Reynolds 531 spec steel tubing. And I told the guy on the phone in England what we needed. He says, "Oh, you're working on a Jaguar." He knew exactly what we were doing. And so we completely rebuilt those as exact copies of the originals. This is by far the most challenging part of this project. That was about 3 months of work because we had to get this right, and it is so critical, to the geometry of the suspension. So, if we put these together wrong, and the first time we drove the car, it would go sideways down the road, there was a problem. So we wanted to avoid that at all costs. So we really took our time, triple, quadruple checked all our measurements, and after every joint brazed, we would mock it all up to make sure nothing had warped during the process. It was a very involved bit of work. But there's the finished result, a whole new set of subframes for the car. And so we're back hanging the suspension, putting the engine back in. And so we found, as I mentioned, the engine block was cracked. So we found, another period correct 327 to go in it. And we also found another period correct aluminum transmission, Super T10 4-speed to replace the one that was cracked. And the engine, we took as much as we could off the old engine, the heads, which had been ported and polished, the custom oil pan that Al made for the engine to go with it. So we preserved as much, the valve covers, intake, as much from the old engine as we could to go on the new donor block. And we just put a mild cam in it, but they did some really good porting and polishing back in the 60s because on 93 octane, it made 384 horsepower at 6,200. And so that's over 120 horsepower over stock Jaguar drivetrain. So by 1960s standards, this car was a rocket ship. By today's standards, it's still very fast. Next thing, keep in mind through this process, we're rebuilding everything mechanical. So rear suspension, brakes, front suspension, wiring. I mean, anything that is functionally critical to the car doing what a car needs to do, we went through it all top to bottom. But the biggest thing was repairing that collision damage to the front nose. Thankfully, that hadn't twisted or damaged the subframes in any way. But it was definitely a good hit to the nose. And luckily they have a great metal shaping course at McPherson. And my classmate Austin, who now works for me, who is very passionate about metalwork, undertook this and started hammering that nose back out. And even after 38 years, metal does have a memory, and so it just kind of needed to be persuaded and guided, back to its original form. Again, unfortunately, the seats were a little too far gone to save. There have been too many mice living inside of them, so we redid those all in house. And there's the Jaguar nose after paint. And being a preservation car and where we weren't repainting the rest of the car, we kind of had a a conundrum as to what to do, because we had repaired this nose. It needed to be painted, but the rest of the car is lacquer from 1968, last time it was painted. So we kind of had to figure out what to do, and we were kind of bouncing ideas back and forth with Rod, and we decided that the Group 44 Jaguar XKEs, which were raced in the early 70s, had this awesome racing stripe horizontally across the hood, and we figured that would be perfect to hide the blend. We got a really good color match, but there's still a slight difference. So that horizontal racing stripe you see on the hood is the perfect way to hide the blend between the new paint on the front and the old paint behind it. And so there's the finished product. I say mechanically, it's a new car, top to bottom, runs and drives beautiful. It'll scare the hell out of you. It's a very fast car, and I've driven some fast stuff. It's probably the fastest car I've driven, just because it's 2,300 pounds, nearly 400 horsepower. It handles like it's on rails. You got 12-inch wide tires in the back, 10-inch wide tires in the front, so it sticks. It's easy to see why Rod, over all the amazing cars he's owned, says this one was his favorite. And it's just a joy to look at too. And so I've had people. I had one guy walk into the shop and straight up tell me, this car makes him sick. And if someone were to do this to a Series 1 Jaguar nowadays, yeah, I could agree with that. As these early, this is 62, they only started building the E-types in 61. These early E-types are a very desirable car, and pristine restored Series 1 XKEs go for a good chunk of money. But this was done at the time when it was just a used sports car, and it was driven hard and enjoyed more than a lot of these trailer queens would ever be. And so I really love the car's history and its story, and that's kind of why I chose to highlight it today when they asked me if there's any project in particular I wanted to highlight. And so that guy hasn't visited the shop since, but I'm not losing any sleep over it. But yeah, so I appreciate you guys coming out. But if you have any questions at all about the Jaguar or mechanical arts or myself, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you. Thank you.